All right. So for the recovery, again, we said the recovery is bottom arm driven. So you should be feeling like it's controlled by here. Lower. Controlled from the bottom hand. Your top arm is just staying connected. Right. So your top arm is just staying connected, but you're not picking it up from the top arm this way. It's going to be a lot more tiring on your shoulder. You're going to be more doing this with your bottom hand. Your top arm is just guiding it. Your top arm also does not bend. Your top arm should not be coming down and around on your recovery like this. That's down and around, down and around. It should be making kind of like a small pizza. Pizza right here. It's going to be up and to the inside shoulder of the person in front of you, and then across to stack your hand. It should not be coming way over your head on that recovery. So if you are getting way over here, you might be leaning too far forward, too low. Try to use your body momentum. So as I'm doing the recovery, if you look at my top hand bend at the elbow, it's got enough bend so that I can stack my top arm. And that bend more or less stays consistent through the pull, through the recovery, sorry. But again, I'm not controlling with the top end at all. I should be able to control it all with the bottom hand. And it stays out in front of me. It doesn't come in towards my hand, towards my head like this and push. It stays out in front of me, and I'm keeping this nice open space between my body during the recovery. So I'm not going in and out, in and out. I'm keeping it out in front of me, relaxed like this. That's what your top arm's doing. As your bottom arm is moving straight, straight along the gunnel, not coming out and around. Right here, and making sure that when we do this, we're not doing a paddle twist where it comes this way. We're making sure we're square right here, and throughout the pull and the recovery, it stays really close to the boat. Even when I'm picking it up in the air, my paddle doesn't come very far from the boat. We're going to try and get a quicker return. We're always trying to maximize water time to air time ratio. So the time in the air is very short. You've got a very nice short path, and that outside arm does have a bend, and it's a bend into a relax. Outside arm relaxes once it's down here, and the top arm is pretty much relaxed until I connect right here with pressure. But even on the recovery, it stays here. Notice the shoulders are not coming up this way. Sometimes we'll say that shoulders are getting really high. That's what this looks like. So if I'm doing this, my left shoulder, inside shoulder is coming up really high, and it doesn't need to. It's going to be a lot more strenuous on my shoulder over time. I'm going to keep it right here. So during the recovery, body's still moving forward, head is still up, chest is up, eyes are up, but my shoulders are low, my hands stay low, paddle stays low, everything stays low. But the top arm doesn't drop. No drop here. That's going to be adding extra distance, extra effort on the recovery when I can just use my body. Okay, one more thing we want to talk about is rotation. We haven't talked too much about rotation yet this year. So again, the core of our stroke is the hinge. Once you have that timing down, you add a little bit of rotation here. So the rotation is a smooth rotation. So it should not be abrupt at the front and then a sit-up, abrupt at the front and then a sit-up. It's going to be a sustained rotation. So it's smoother, it's so smooth you almost like kind of don't notice it's there. And it's nothing crazy. We're not going for wild rotations up here. Definitely not above the water. Rotation will be kind of right here. And it kind of happens, it connects your whole body. So your shoulders, your chest, and if you can get a little bit of your hips into it, that's good too. One thing, make sure we're rotating. We're not rotating inside, left, and right of the boat. It's around your center, around your core. So, example, so here's our hinge stroke. Our hinge straight, there's no rotation here. So this is fine. If you can start here, this is good. When you add the rotation, it looks like this. So it's just a little bit more especially on that reach as you're entering right here. A little bit of rotation here, still holding on to the paddle. And the rotation goes all the way to my hip, right? And it's still rotating. It's not all up front and then kind of a slower at the end. It's, if anything, slower in the front and then more in the back. Right? This goes into the next bit. We've been talking a lot about buckets. When we talk about buckets, we're talking about literally this water I'm picking up at the end of the stroke. This is also an indicator that I'm pulling all the way through the end of the stroke. So if I were to pull all the way to my hip, but not really pulling the last bit of my stroke, it looks like this. So you can see my canoe, it surges at the front of my stroke, and then it kind of slows down even though my paddle's in the water. So this is not what we're trying to do. We want to get the canoe to glide a little bit more. So to do that, add a little bit of rotation kind of from the middle and the back of the stroke. So it looks like this here. I'm not putting in more effort, I'm just changing where I'm adding that rotation. And now I'm doing that. I'm adding a little bit more at the end. You can see the difference in how my canoe moves. I'm not putting in any more effort, right? Sometimes when we add the buckets, it feels really hard because we're not used to it. So if I add the hard buckets, like it's going to be really big. But even if I'm going at a nice, comfortable pace, it's more about the rhythm of where we're adding that rotation. You can feel it at the end of your stroke. It's a little bit more top arm press, a little bit more of this twisting across, a little bit of that upper sit up. And this is happening at the very end, like as I'm kind of like kicking myself forward, knocking myself forward into the next stroke, rather than stopping back here, taking a pause. So you notice if I do this too, if I sit up too far, then the moment I go forward right here, I interrupt the momentum of the boat. Interrupt, go, interrupt, go. We want to have that little kickoff at the end to help us get forward. So there's not like a moment where we're kind of shifting our weight backwards. Because the same way where you sit up this way, moves the canoe or boat forward, as you come forward, it also slows the canoe the other way, right? So we want to have pressure as we're doing that. It's almost like we're finishing the stroke. Making sure we have that top arm up, and making sure that bottom arm doesn't bend early. So notice my bottom arm doesn't bend until I get pretty close to my hip, and I'm not really pulling with that bottom arm. It's more of a core twist than a top arm. You want to be careful you're not doing this, where we start pulling early with that bottom arm, because again that makes us lose the connection with the back. So you want to make sure you got that forward here, forward here. Alright, and again this is kind of an exaggeration, but we do want to have that feeling. So in a real race scenario, let's move a little faster. I am putting a little bit in the back, and as I'm doing it, I'm twisting my blade a little bit on the exit right here, just a tiny bit. So I'm not scooping it towards me this way. I'm like kind of flicking it outwards that way. That gives me a little bit more pressure moving forward. It's called the J stroke. You can look that up. It's a good stroke to use in canoeing. And it works across the dragon boat too. Cool. Alright, that's it. Okay, when we start a race, from the very first stroke, we call it a wet start, where our paddle's in the water. We want to make sure we're in a good, strong position. Sometimes I see people do really funky things on that very first stroke. So when we're getting ready for that first stroke, we'll do it probably on when we hear it, like, you know, we have alignment. Basically at that point, get your paddles in. You want to make sure your body is up and forward, have a good posture. Your hands should be roughly in front of like your face, ready to push forward on that first stroke. It should not be up here, so we're not trying to lean as far forward as we can and crunch down as low as we can with our body. We want to be where we are strong in the stroke here. That bottom hammer, make sure We should definitely not see any of the blade here. If anything, you can get a little bit extra deep on the first couple strokes so we're not moving very much. Top hand position. The elbow should definitely be kind of more either neutral or elbow pointing slightly down from the top hand. We don't want to be doing this. So doing an extra crank from here isn't going to move us forward. We want to use our backs right here to move us forward. When we do this, also make sure you really have a lot of top arm pressure, the first few strokes especially. And here, this position, this ready position, you should be able to breathe. You should be ready. You shouldn't be all tight. You shouldn't be holding your breath. Just be forward. Take some deep breaths. Be ready for it, and it can be called at any point after they call we have attention. So usually we have attention, please. Paddles, are you ready? Attention, and go. On that first stroke, really make sure you get that top arm pressure. Get that full stroke all the way to the end. Make sure those first few strokes you get extra deep, and you make sure that recovery is very quick. If you're doing this on a one-man, you can vary with whether you like the faster rate stroke or a heavier stroke. For the dragon boats, we do want to get that full stroke. The length of the stroke is not the only thing that's important. It's really how fast we recover to the air, because we want to have a longer water time and a quick air time. And then on those first few strokes, if you can, really try to get those buckets, and really try not to sit up all the way here, because that, again, like we talked about in the last video, it interrupts your momentum to do this. When you could go forward, 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 really work on that entry, that depth on those first few strokes. Okay, good.
Okay, this last bit, I'm going through some examples of recovery, like just common things that people do, especially coming from other teams. This is the back view. So this is kind of what I'm looking like from the back. You can see my elbow goes slightly outwards, but my hand stays very close to the canoe at all times. It never swings outwards. My body's moving forward and up. My top arm's not going too high. This first one is a wide swing. It's also called a D around. It's very popular on the East Coast. You notice how my hand is now swinging outside and around. The paddle is going further away from the canoe and then coming back in. So we want to avoid doing this style. There are some benefits to doing this, but it's not going to work if we don't all agree on the same thing. This next one here is the outside elbow. It's staying closer to my body, and my hand is kind of either coming up and around, or maybe it's outside the canoe compared to my elbow. So your hand should kind of stay inside your elbow and close to the canoe. And again, this is back going to a good comfortable. So going from this one and the previous one, you notice my elbow comes out a little bit more and my hand stays close, versus the other one where the elbow stays close and the hand kind of comes out and around. Some more examples from the front of the boat. So this is another more good example of recovery. So you see the elbows coming out a little bit. That bottom hand stays right along the gunnels, and the top hand is it's moving up and forward and across. You'll see it compared to the next, another one example later, what it looks like when we're dropping it really across. So you should be aiming for that upper shoulder of the person in front of you. So this one again is that D around style, that East Coast style. Notice how the paddle comes out and around a lot more. So the top arm stays lower, which is a good thing, but it's going to be a little bit different, a little bit trying to get that entry coming in from that side. So notice how again it goes out and around. That elbows, the hand is coming out and around. That wider swing. We want to avoid doing that. This one, you can see my top arm comes way over my head as I'm kind of reaching forward and leaning. That's going to be a little bit more strenuous on my shoulder over time, so we want to keep that shoulder low and make sure we're not crunching down as we move forward. And then this one here, this is what it's, sometimes we'll see when we say top arm drop. If your top arm is dropping into the boat, it's kind of an exaggerated out and across. And we don't want to be picking up the blade by swinging the top arm lower. We want to be using the bottom hand. And again, this is compared to a good, more smooth example of what we are looking for. And again, different teams will have different styles, and they're all valid. We just want to make sure we all agree on what we're doing so we can all move the boat together in the same way. So this is a recovery, elbow out slightly, but that bottom hand stays right on the inside.